I was exhausted and ready to sleep at my hotel when my manager, Diane, called, demanding I return to the office by 8 a.m. I had to book a flight, pack, and get to the airport. It was too late to call my wife without waking the kids, so I asked the taxi to drop me off at home. Sneaking inside, I noticed the house was dark except for the light in our bedroom, where I heard my wife and a man talking. My kids were probably staying with relatives. Realizing my wife was having an affair, I felt sick. Remembering my grandparents' advice to stay calm, I took deep breaths. I've always struggled with a bad temper, inherited from my grandfather, who warned me about its potential to ruin my life. I decided not to act rashly but to gather evidence instead. Using the new smartphone provided by my employer for testing, with its clear camera and microphone, I began recording. From the shadows, I captured my wife cheating, even though it crushed my pride. I resolved to get a DNA test for the kids later. As I recorded, I overheard something that made me lose control. I rushed into the room, fought the man, and drove him out of the house. My wife, Linda, hid in a corner, terrified. "Come here," I commanded, my voice unnervingly calm. I felt detached, like I was watching a movie of my own life. Whenever the beast within me took over, I often remembered little afterward. This had only happened a few times in my life. "Come here," I repeated. She crawled to the corner of the bed, trembling. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry, Ethan," she pleaded. "You will shut up," the beast growled inside me. "Do you regret those times with Jacob, too?" I asked, digging for more of her deceit. Linda shuddered, her eyes wide with terror. I wondered how long this had been going on and how many others there might have been. "Please, I'm so sorry. Don't hurt me, please," she begged. "You're a cheating liar. You've desecrated this house, this bedroom, this bed. You've betrayed your husband and your children," I declared, letting the beast's rage take the reins. Her face went pale, her teeth chattering as she shook in fear. The beast within me felt oddly satisfied, as if giving me a nod of approval. "You will pack your things and leave by noon. Take all the bedroom furniture, especially this bed. Leave my belongings neatly on the floor. Respect my things. Understand?" I demanded. "How will I do all this?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I don't care. Maybe ask your crazy brothers I lent money to." "Noon," the beast roared through me. "Yes, noon. I understand," she whispered in defeat. Linda shook, covering her head as I turned and left. The beast guided me as I grabbed my bags and headed to the car. The other man was gone. Tossing my bags into the trunk, the beast handed me back control. I glanced in the mirror and saw my nose was broken, ruining my looks. Driving to the hospital, I ignored the pain. The doctors found I had a broken nose, 2 fractured ribs, a possible concussion, and several bruises. They wanted to admit me, but I refused since I had to be at work in 2 hours. The police were called. I told them I was the victim but couldn't remember much. They tested me, and I was clean. As a local employee of a prominent company, they let me go after verifying my story. At work, I headed to my boss's office. Hannah Porter, the VP, had a full bathroom there. I showered and went to bed, still not feeling much pain. When I arrived at the office, I saw Ryan's car. As our best troubleshooter, he was underpaid and undervalued, and I wanted to change that. But it meant navigating through my older brothers, who co-owned the company. Ryan wasn't at his desk. I found him asleep on my office couch, his luggage beside him. I admired his resilience, though his face was bruised purple and black, with a splint on his nose. "Ryan, what happened to you?" I asked, touching his shoulder. His eyes opened, first fierce, then gentle as usual. "Let's just say I came home to surprise my wife, but she surprised me more." "Know any good divorce lawyers?" Ryan replied. "Yes, I know Chloe Myers. She was my college roommate and owes me a favor. Hannah called Chloe. Morning, Chloe. I need your help for a friend who needs a divorce lawyer. Can you see him this morning? Thanks. See you soon. Turning to Ryan, she said, she'll make time for you. Now, what happened? Hannah, we have a lot of work today. How about you sit with me while I talk to Chloe so I don't have to repeat myself? Ryan suggested. Okay, Ryan. But I want the full story, Hannah agreed. Ryan was the best assistant I could hope for, and working with him made the job bearable. Together, we spent the next hour untangling yet another mess created by her brothers. The company would be twice as successful without them. Chloe arrived, and I told her my story, omitting details about the beast. I claimed I blacked out with rage and showed them the video. Ryan asked Linda, am I more important than your children? Linda replied, I'm yours. I don't care about them. Chloe and Hannah were shocked. I growled, Chloe, I want full custody of my kids, even if it means sacrificing our assets. I don't want to pay child support. My kids are with her parents, and I want to pick them up. Ethan, I'll do my best, but even with this evidence, full custody is tough. Your wife might claim she spoke in the heat of the moment. I'll draft preliminary documents. Give my card to your wife and have her lawyer contact me. Stay calm and avoid more mistakes, understand? Chloe looked serious. I'm sorry, Chloe. I lost control. I'll stay calm. Thanks for representing me, I replied. Hannah says you're the best, Ryan said. Hannah and Chloe exchanged a few words in private before Chloe left. We had been working together for a couple of hours when I suddenly felt extremely nervous. The beast was anxious about Linda leaving my house by noon. I wanted to let her stay, but the beast had other plans and seemed out of control. Oh no. Hannah, I have a personal matter to handle. It should only take an hour or two. I'm sorry, but can I leave? I'll be back as soon as I can, Ryan requested. No problem, Ryan. You've been a great help. Just come back quickly, Hannah replied. I ran to my car, worried the beast might take over again. When I arrived home, there was a rental truck, and Linda's brothers were moving the mattress. 2 police cars and 3 officers were also there. I grabbed my laptop and approached the police. Officers, I have a recording to show you about last night. May I? I asked. Are you Ethan Cross, Linda's husband? The police sergeant asked firmly. Yes, I am, Sergeant. I'll answer all your questions. Could you please watch this recording? They seemed ready to cuff me, but the sergeant had compassionate eyes despite her tough demeanor. Okay, Mr. Cross, we'll watch it, but stay where you are, she ordered. You have my word, Sergeant, I promised. I started the recording and turned up the volume. Even some neighbors watched. When Linda's voice said, I don't give a damn about them, Linda dropped the box she was carrying. We all looked over as she scrambled to pick up her things. I noticed a bag of white powder fall out of the box. I saw something suspicious, Sergeant, I said. She saw it too and ran toward Linda, calling for backup. I remembered a scene in the recording and zoomed in on a small mirror with white powder streaks on the bedside table. I showed this to an officer, who called the sergeant over. She then handcuffed Linda, who cried and sobbed. Her brothers watched in shock. The sergeant ordered them to finish their work as 2 officers took Linda away. Sergeant, what just happened? I asked. Your wife was arrested for possession of prohibited substances. It's powder. We'll test it to confirm, the sergeant explained. What about my children? When can I see them? I asked, looking frantic. Where are they? She asked, concerned. Probably at my wife's parents' house about 5 miles from here. These are your children. Your wife is in custody. If I were you, I'd go get them, she advised. Of course, I need to pick them up. I love them. But what if there are problems? I don't want an ugly scene in front of my kids, I worried. The sergeant's worried look cleared, and she seemed relieved. I'll stay here until they finish and then follow you to your relatives. There will be no violence, but I need a full statement of your injuries. Okay. I came home to find my wife with Jacob Rayner. I recorded it for proof. When my wife said something terrible about our kids, I blacked out. The next thing I knew, I was yelling at her to leave by noon. I went to the hospital after that. I don't know how I got injured or if I hurt Jacob. I handed her my hospital documents listing my injuries. She whistled. Does anything hurt? She asked. Strangely, no. I know the pain will start eventually, and I'm not looking forward to it. By the way, you have the most beautiful eyes, I replied. Feeling dizzy, I leaned against her patrol car. Maybe I should take you to the hospital, she suggested. I'm just tired and only slept for 2 hours. I need to pick up my kids and get back to work. We have a daycare at work, so it'll be fine, I explained. Okay, but I'll take you to your wife's parents, she said. Whatever you say. My soon-to-be ex-brothers-in-law were finally done. I locked the house and got into the patrol car. During the drive, the sergeant offered some advice. If I were you, I'd get temporary custody in a restraining order against your wife, preventing her from entering the family home or seeing the kids. Right now, while she's in jail, you have control. Use this time wisely, Rosemary advised. I will, I said firmly. I called Chloe, explained the situation, and shared Rosemary's advice. She assured me she'd handle everything by 11 a.m. tomorrow. I started calling the sergeant by her first name, Rosemary, and even flirted a bit. She gave me strange but not unfriendly looks. Aren't you too happy for someone in this situation? She asked. I'm going to pick up my children. I thought I wouldn't see them for weeks. I have good people helping me. Why let my wife's betrayal hurt me more than it already does? My marriage fell apart, but I'm not wasting time. I'm going to enjoy life and my kids. In other words, I'm going to stop and smell the flowers, Rose, I said, wiggling my eyebrows at her. I don't know if you're smart, crazy, need a doctor, or maybe I just need sleep, she remarked. There was no confrontation at my mother-in-law's house. Rosemary told them to hand over the kids, and we left. They had never liked or respected me, and I suspected they knew about Linda's betrayal. My kids were thrilled to see me and excited to ride in the police car. Hope, my 5-year-old, wanted to hear the siren. Luke, my 3-year-old, wanted to sit on Rosemary's lap. Introducing her as Aunt Rosemary didn't help. Aunt Rosemary, are you going to come to our house? Hope asked. I can't, honey. I'm too busy, Rosemary replied. What shifts do you work, Rosemary? I asked. I work from 8 to 5 all week, she answered suspiciously. Then you can come to dinner tomorrow night at 6:30. Hope, you can show Aunt Rosemary your doll collection, I suggested. That's great, Daddy. Hope exclaimed. Steve, I never, Rosemary began. You don't want to upset Hope, do you? Not now, I said, giving her an innocent look. Okay, what do you want for dinner, Hope? Rosemary asked. Chicken. We'll have chicken, Hope decided. I'm doing this for the kids' sake. You seem a bit off, so I'd better keep an eye on you. Should I bring anything, Hope? Rosemary asked. What should Rosemary bring? I asked Hope. Ice cream. Hope said. Rosemary stopped in front of my office building to let us out. Okay, I'll bring the ice cream, Rosemary agreed. Thank you, Aunt Rosemary, Hope said. Thank you, Luke added. Goodbye, Rosemary, I said. She waved goodbye and drove off. Rosemary's perspective. What am I doing? Steve could be a suspect if Jacob presses charges. I can't believe I was sent to his house. I've always admired Steve Cross. I thought I'd have to arrest him. I remember the first time I saw him with his kids in the park 2 years ago. He made my knees weak with his appearance, mannerisms, voice, and movement. He should be a model. Every Sunday, more women showed up at the park when he was there. We even chatted sometimes. Did you see him last weekend? He did the sweetest thing. I took pictures of landscapes, which of course included Steve, and now I was called to arrest him. Thank God things turned out differently. He said I had the most beautiful eyes and flirted with me. It's probably because he hasn't slept with anyone for a long time. I must be one of the ugliest women on the planet. I have the shape of a brick and the face of a bulldog, and he flirted with me. It's almost good his face is punched. I don't know if I could sit across from him with his usual gorgeous face. I wanted to scream like a girl meeting a pop idol. Calm down, Rosemary. His kids called me Aunt Rosemary. Do your job, Rosemary. You need to visit Jacob Rayner and get a statement. Steve's perspective. I dropped my kids off at daycare and rushed to see Hannah. My behavior was odd, possibly from lack of sleep or the beast, but I felt more persistent and even flirted with Rosemary. I should be grieving my marriage, but it felt like it ended long ago. Something was blocking my pain, and I hoped it lasted. Hannah and I finished our work that day. Hannah, I think I'll be exhausted tomorrow. Can I take a day off? Sure, Steve. I might call you, but you can stay home. I'm sorry about your situation. Good night. Good night, Hannah. My broken ribs worried me the most since they could limit my mobility, and I needed to take care of my kids. We took a taxi home, and I ordered pizza for dinner. Hope and Luke asked about their mom. I explained, Mom and Dad had a big fight, but we both still love you very much. Because of the fight, Mom will stay at your grandparents' house. It's okay, Daddy. As long as you stay with us. We're tired of staying at our grandparents' house, Hope said. Both kids hugged me tightly. I realized they had spent many nights with their grandparents, likely when Linda was cheating. The beast growled inside me. That night, I found an emergency nanny service and arranged for someone to come at 7 a.m. I hid the key under the doormat, anticipating my lack of sleep and the pain that might make it hard to get up. I transferred most of our savings from joint accounts to my own checking account and canceled our joint credit cards. I considered emptying our safe deposit box since I had the only key but decided to think about it. We all slept in the guest bedroom's double bed so I wouldn't have to run down the hall if the kids woke up. This morning, Luke and Hope woke me up. Dad, someone is ringing the doorbell. Just then, my phone rang. Mr. Cross, this is Gloria from the nanny service. Are you home? Yes, Gloria, thanks for coming. I'm a bit tired. I put the key under the doormat. Please come in and go upstairs. Of course. I'll come now. I heard the front door open and footsteps. The woman who came in seemed to be in her late 50s. I explained the situation. She needed to get Hope ready and take her to daycare, then look after Luke for the rest of the day. She quickly got to work and was very warm toward the children. I rested for the day. A messenger from Chloe's office delivered the temporary custody order and restraining order. Chloe called to say that my wife had been served with divorce papers while she was in jail. She expected Linda to be released that evening. Between the controlled substance charge and her arrest record, I now had a great chance of getting full custody. While Gloria went to pick up Hope from daycare, I stopped by the bank. I bought a new safe deposit box and moved most of the contents from the old one to the new one. I left only Linda's things in the old box at the bank across the street. I also opened new checking and savings accounts in my name only and transferred money over. Once the divorce was settled, I wouldn't mind Linda getting half, but I didn't want her wasting money on illegal substances or bail. I felt amazingly good. Though the pain had started to set in, it wasn't as bad as I feared. My nose hurt the most. I decided to buy some chicken from the grocery store and cook it tonight. Gloria left at 5, and to play it safe, I asked her to come back tomorrow. That evening, Rosemary arrived quickly, and we had a wonderful dinner. Hope asked to see Rosemary's weapon, and she carefully explained how dangerous real weapons were. I must have looked terrible to Rosemary because she kept asking about my condition. I decided to milk her attention for all it was worth. She agreed to sit with us and watch a children's movie. Then I pretended to feel dizzy and asked her to stay through another movie. I'd feel more comfortable if you stayed while I was dizzy, just in case, I said. Oh my God, I'm sweating, I thought to myself. During the second movie, she told me how she interrogated Jacob Rayner. She made me promise not to share what she said. Rosemary had found Jacob living in a hotel in a nearby town. He was absolutely terrified of me. He said you forced him into the bathroom and attacked him without warning, she said, raising an eyebrow. She then showed him the video, particularly the part where he appeared to throw himself off the bed toward me. She listed all my injuries and compared them to his minor cuts and bruises. I told him I'd be happy to press charges against you, but I warned him that you might reciprocate. If you did, he could very well serve time in prison, she said, smiling slightly. Jacob decided not to press charges. I told her that, since I didn't fully remember what happened, I wouldn't press charges either. Still, I made a mental note to send Jacob's wife a copy of the video. Rosemary left at 11, and I went back to bed with the children. As time passed, I refused all communication with Linda and made her go through Chloe. My ribs healed in a little over 3 weeks, but my nose still hurt. I redecorated my bedroom with new paint, crown molding, and curtains. I finally bought a bedroom set I liked, a massive 4-poster bed with matching furniture, all made of heavy dark wood. It was perfect. I tricked Rosemary into spending many evenings at my house. I hadn't hit on her yet, but I was planning to. I had to wait for my nose to heal. Damn, that thing hurt. Everything was going well at work. I spent a few nights out of town but hired Gloria to cover for me. Audrey did everything she could to reduce my trips. Finally, the doctor told me my nose was completely healed. That evening, I pretended to feel dizzy again and convinced Rosemary to stay late for another movie. I went to the kitchen and got 2 bowls of ice cream. When I returned, instead of sitting in my chair, I sat next to her on the sofa, close enough to brush shoulders. We ate ice cream in silence while watching the movie. I gave her time to relax before leaning in and pulling her a little closer. She looked at me, her expression confused but intrigued. "What are you doing, Ethan?" she asked. "The doctor said my nose is completely healed, so I don't have to worry about hurting it anymore. That's why I'm making a pass at you now. Is that clear enough? Why do you want to kiss me? I'm ugly." "I'm absolutely ugly," Rosemary said, her voice trembling. I put my finger to her lips to stop her. "You're a healthy young woman my age with wonderful eyes, a lovely voice, and a fantastic personality. You take good care of yourself and stay in shape. I like you. Can we kiss now?" I asked. She started, but I leaned in and kissed her. We had a great time that night and never finished the movie. Unfortunately, the night ended as usual, but she agreed to come over tomorrow. Rosemary's perspective. I couldn't believe it. The hottest man in town wanted to see me again. I've only kissed one other guy, and he was old, ugly, and drunk. Things were going well with Rosemary. One evening, I mentioned that Gloria sometimes took the kids overnight and then asked Rosemary if she was free on Saturday evening. She said yes and invited me to her apartment. Rosemary greeted me at the door in a dark blouse and black trousers. Why do women always wear dark colors? What's wrong with bright, happy colors? I teased. I handed her a bouquet of long-stemmed roses and a box of chocolates. She blushed, her eyes lighting up, and I kissed her. Rosemary's perspective. It had been almost 2 months since I'd been intimate, and I had an idea of where this might lead. What did you cook for dinner? I asked. Lasagna. It's in the oven, she answered. Can you turn it off? I asked, grinning. Yes, please do, she responded, her voice uncertain. But, she began, but I interrupted her. Sorry, Rosemary, but I'm just too impatient, I said, pulling her closer. We made love. Afterwards, I lay next to her and kissed her tenderly. She kissed me back, closed her eyes, and fell asleep. The lasagna was almost ruined but still edible. I ate 2.5 large pieces along with garlic bread to regain my strength. Rosemary ate almost 2 pieces herself. Rosemary's perspective. It hit me, there I was, sitting with a gorgeous, undressed man in my kitchen. What a happy day. The lovemaking was better than I could have hoped for my first time. After eating and brushing our teeth, we cuddled on the couch and watched TV. I felt proud. Ugly old Rosemary Hoover Watkins had driven a gorgeous guy crazy. The phone rang non-stop for 15 minutes. It was my neighbor and friend Beth, screaming in my ear. Rosemary, are you okay? We're all outside your door, ready to break it down, but we decided to wait since you're a cop, Beth said. Honey, everything is fine. I pressed against Steve's chest. I have a friend visiting. Sorry if we disturbed you tonight, I replied. Is it that gorgeous guy from yesterday? She asked. Yes, indeed it is. Steve leaned over and kissed me. Outside, I heard laughter, cheers, and whistles. Most of my neighbors were single women, and I made friends with them. As a policewoman, I protect and serve well. Tonight, I'd keep them awake. We made love all night and then fell asleep. When Steve woke me, he had already showered, dressed, and looked as handsome as ever. I'm sorry, but I need to pick up my children, he apologized. I smiled sleepily. I understand. He kissed me, promising to call, and I knew he would. Exhausted, I trusted him to lock the door and went back to sleep. Steve's perspective. It was a wonderful night with Rosemary. I opened the door, checked my feet, and closed it carefully, making sure it locked. Flashes of light surrounded me. 5 women, some with cameras, stood there clapping and applauding. Feeling a bit awkward, I bowed and thanked them. Then they all extended their right hands like queens. I walked down the hallway humming an old Irish tune my grandfather taught me and heard them sigh behind me. The next few months were pleasant. I didn't spend many nights with Rosemary because of Hope and Luke, but the ones I did were wonderful. However, there were 2 problems in our relationship. The worst was her emotional distance. We'd make progress, but then she'd retreat behind mental walls. The lovemaking was great, but the emotional connection was lacking. Another issue driving me crazy was her constant dark clothing. She always wore black or dark gray, sometimes a white blouse, which felt just as somber. I wanted to shake her and scream, dress in happy colors. Stop looking like you're going to a funeral. My divorce was moving forward, and we had a court date with the judge. Chloe proposed a settlement, but Linda's side refused, despite Chloe warning them they were lucky to get that offer. From Chloe, I learned my wife's infidelity started about 6 months before I caught her with Jacob. My ex-friend Dan had invited her to a party while I was out of town, where he got her drunk and gave her illegal substances, lowering her inhibitions. This led to a 2-month affair filled with wild parties whenever I was away. Fearing I'd find out, Dan handed Linda over to Jacob, and she continued cheating until I caught her. Linda was convicted for illegal substance use and entered rehab, where she was still undergoing therapy. She had a delusional idea that I'd forgive her or agree to joint custody. To convince me, she told her story to Chloe and offered to have her therapist talk openly with me. Despite our unsatisfactory married life, Linda willingly slept with Dan and Jacob. She didn't use substances when I was home, which indicated she knew she needed help but chose not to seek it. Instead, she neglected me and our children, often leaving them with her parents when I was away. My grandparents had fought for 4 years to get me out of foster care after my parents died, improving their health and financial situation to gain custody. In contrast, my wife gave our children to her parents so she could have affairs. Her parents never liked me or our kids. They thought I was too pretty and not manly enough for their daughter. They were strict with Hope and Luke, trying to toughen them up, as if beauty implied weakness. They'll never see my children again, and my ungrateful relatives will no longer benefit from my money. The day of the divorce finally arrived. In court, we presented our evidence to the judge. She watched the video and examined both of us carefully. She seemed to think Linda was unhinged and granted the divorce under Chloe's original terms. This upset Chloe, but I was satisfied. My ex-wife received half of our assets and retirement accounts but not my company pension. I had to pay her half the equity in our house. I got full custody of the children, while Linda received 2 4-hour supervised visits per month. Neither of us paid child support. I also had to keep her on my health insurance for 5 years unless she remarried. I deducted the loans I gave to her family from her share of the assets, leaving her with about $350,000, excluding retirement accounts. She also had to pay her own lawyer and her share of the legal fees. Chloe didn't charge me for her services, saying she owed Hannah for all the good things she'd done for her and knew I had supported Hannah for years. Jacob Rayner left the state, and his wife filed for divorce. Dan, my ex-friend, moved across town and changed offices. When he sees me, he avoids me. Shortly after the divorce, Rosemary ended our relationship. She said she wanted to remain friends but didn't see a romantic future for us. I was saddened but noticed that she had always held back emotionally. A couple of weeks later, she told me she had met a local FBI agent. I wished her well, though we still met occasionally for lunches and dinners. About a month after Rosemary and I separated, I was putting the kids to bed when I heard strange noises at the front door, whimpering and scratching. Thinking it was a lost dog, I opened the door to find Linda leaning against the screen, crying and scratching it with one hand. She had no coat or shoes, and it was around 1 in the morning. I carefully opened the screen door and carried her inside. She was unresponsive, and I hoped it wasn't due to illegal substances. Instead of calling the police, I decided she needed warmth. I ran a hot bath, undressed her, and put her in it, remembering her preferred temperature. She used to love soaking in the bath for hours, so I set it up the way she liked, even positioning the swing-arm LCD TV to play one of her old favorite DVDs, I Love Lucy. I made her a strawberry smoothie and brought a bottle of water. When I returned, I gave her a straw and told her to drink. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days, so I made her a grilled cheese sandwich and chips. Linda ate everything and drank the smoothie but didn't say a word. She stayed in the bath for almost 2 hours, probably fearing I would throw her out. Finally, I brought her one of my robes. "Stand up and put this on," I said firmly. Then I carried her to the guest bedroom and laid her on the bed. I brought her more Lucy DVDs and another bottle of water. "Relax and watch some shows. We'll talk in the morning," I told her. It was good that tomorrow was Saturday. I took her clothes to the laundromat and washed them. Then I fell asleep, wondering what was going on. In the morning, I decided to let the kids wake Linda. At 9, I took them to her room, telling them I had a surprise. They were excited to see their mother. Hope stood by the bed while Luke climbed on top of her. "Mommy, Mommy," they cried. Linda woke up and held them close, expressing her love as if she hadn't seen them in years, despite her recent supervised visits. They kissed, hugged, and tickled each other. It was sweet, but I couldn't forget her betrayal. Eventually, they calmed down, and Linda offered to cook them breakfast. They eagerly agreed, and she looked at me for permission. I nodded. I decided to give her more time with the kids, knowing they would soon want to watch TV or play a game. When they did, I sat down with Linda at the kitchen table to talk. "Linda, you can't stay here forever. I need to know what's going on," I said. "Ethan," she began, "my family never liked you. They thought you were too soft. If they saw you that night with Jacob, they would have been terrified. They always mocked us, assuming you were cheating with all your business travel. I know that's not true, but I started to believe it. That night, Dan seduced me into a life of pills and reckless behavior, and I lost sight of being a good mother and wife. My therapist is still helping me understand how I got here, but you probably don't care," Linda admitted, her voice trembling. "At my parents' house, they exploited me, giving me all the heavy work and convincing me to lend them money. 2 days ago, I found out my father was writing checks from my account and gave my car to my brother without my knowledge. I feel like an idiot for trusting them and betraying you. First, we'll go to the bank, then file a police report. You don't have to press charges, but it might prompt them to return your property," I said firmly. Linda nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "Linda, you listened to them and ruined your life. You're the mother of my children. Listen to me now, okay?" We got in the car and went to the bank. Luckily, Linda found an old pair of dirty garden shoes, otherwise, she would have been barefoot. She still didn't remember losing her shoes, having simply run away from her parents' house. At the bank, we discovered her father had stolen almost $100,000, leaving her with only $250,000. We then went to the police station, where I asked to speak with Detective Rosemary Watkins. She was surprised to see me with Linda. We explained the situation, and she promised to look into it. Linda's parents started calling me in a panic, but Linda refused to talk to them. I had no problem being tough. All of Linda's property was returned, including her car. They also had to pay back $25,000 immediately and signed a loan document for the remaining $75,000 over 10 years at 12% interest, using their home as collateral. After that, Linda wanted nothing more to do with her parents or brothers. "Steve, thank you for your help. I'm glad to see the mother of my children in a better place," I said. "Steve, I hurt you badly and still need therapy, but can I stay in the guest room to reconnect with my family?" Linda asked cautiously. "Linda, I have an offer, but you might not want it. You caused me severe emotional trauma. If you stay, you must help around the house and take care of the children. I'll set strict rules to rebuild trust. Think carefully before accepting." Linda flinched, her face tightening. "Steve, please believe me. I truly regret my past actions." "Linda, I can't trust you anymore. One more thing, if you accept, the house will be under video surveillance. This will be hard for you, so don't accept lightly." Linda accepted, though her therapist was against it. We agreed she would continue therapy. I set up a separate room for her and established strict rules. She went back on birth control and bought clothes of my choosing. I paid her a salary for housework and childcare, which the kids loved. I reconnected with Linda without emotional attachment and kept strict limits. I confided in Hannah about my situation with Linda. Hannah wasn't worried about Linda but about me, fearing my chaotic life would prevent me from finding true love. I told her about a woman I was interested in, who was currently unavailable, and that I had a plan for the future. Hannah felt relieved that I wasn't trapping myself with Linda. Hannah's perspective. Despite loving Steve, I saw him make some foolish decisions. However, he was more effective when he had a stable relationship. During the period between Rosemary leaving and Linda's return, Steve wasn't as competent as usual. He was still better than most, but not at his usual high level. There was a tension in his eyes that was unsettling. Watching Steve is one of my few pleasures, and seeing him with those bruises was tough. The tension in his eyes now seemed even worse, so I should probably stop complaining about his personal life. I hope he finds happiness with the new woman he's interested in. When my brothers and I inherited the company, each got 25% of the shares, with another 25% sold publicly. Over the years, I bought back shares, increasing my stake to over 35%, while my brothers owned less than 20%. Steve's job was to secure another 16% of the vote to help me replace my older brother as CEO of Hammer Inc. He first secured the employees' 7% vote, as they knew who made the corporation successful. Steve's charm was effective in winning over the women who controlled more than half of the remaining shares. The transition was bloodless, and my brother retired to the Caribbean. I finally rewarded Steve with bonus checks and a promotion. Though I couldn't make him president, the deserving manager took that role. I invited Steve to dinner at a Hilton restaurant with the best prime rib in town. "Steve, we did it. You've been wonderful and a great help for many years," I told him. As we sipped wine, Steve looked at me with a strange tension, like he was about to jump out of a plane. "Besides the huge bonus check, I'd like you to accept the position of vice president. Hannah, you're doing a wonderful job running the company without interference. I know you'll be a huge success. As for the position, I'm very sorry, but I can't accept it," Steve said. My stomach cramped, and I almost choked on my wine. "But Steve, why?" I asked, barely keeping my composure. Steve sighed and leaned forward. "As I mentioned, there's a woman who interests me. Our company policies prevent me from pursuing her, so I'll have to quit. He must be interested in another Hammer employee." My mind raced. I can change the rules if necessary. I'm not losing Steve. 2 weeks ago, in anticipation of my future romance, I stopped all physical closeness with Linda. She pretended to be disappointed but was actually relieved. I also had a complete physical exam and was free of all illnesses, so now I felt ready to start the chase. Why is he telling me this? I can't let him go. Why is he holding my hand and looking at me so intently? Why? Oh God. "Audrey, darling, would you like to dance?" Steve suggested the Hilton for its prime rib and arranged everything so we'd have a dance floor available. He set me up. He slowly lifted me from my chair. I was completely shocked. "You?" I whispered. Steve smiled. "You're the one I want. Please dance with me." We danced, and I didn't want it to end, even after 4 songs. The food on our table was cold by the time we sat down again. Steve looked at me kindly. "They actually have room service here, but we don't have a room. Please don't think badly of me, but I've been looking forward to this for some time." He showed me a room key card. Then this best negotiator in the world kissed me. I followed him to the elevator, and we went to the room and made love. Audrey's perspective. "Steve, I love you. Steve, I love you. Steve, I love you." Steve confessed his love to me. I've always had a crush on Steve but was too scared to admit it. I thought I was too old, too plain, and that Steve was too great. Now Steve tells me he loves me. Don't wake me up. He is a magnificent, wonderful, kind, and intelligent man who loves me. I was the essence of his joy. On Monday, I called an emergency board meeting with the president. I announced that Steve had resigned. The board members were shocked and alarmed. For many of them, meeting Steve was the highlight of their visits. I explained that Steve had been romantically involved with an employee and quit to pursue his love interest. Everyone appreciated Steve's honesty and integrity but agreed that the company needed him. They voted unanimously to change the policy immediately. Steve would be offered my old job. Mary, the new president, looked at me suspiciously. "Audrey, you didn't say who Steve is in love with. You two are very close. If he told anyone, it was you. So, who is it? The room full of Steve's admirers turned and stared at me. Me, I answered quietly. They all screamed, thrilled for me. For 3 months, Steve and I made love whenever we could. His drive and stamina were exhausting me, but I was determined to take care of him. He admitted that since catching Linda cheating, he had become a carnal beast. I needed to keep up. He was my man, and I would take care of him. We were discussing marriage when the pregnancy test showed a positive result. Nervously, I told Steve I had lied about the pills. He was overjoyed and wanted to marry me. I was ecstatic. We had a small but elegant wedding at the Hilton with around 100 guests. Hope was the flower girl, Luke was the ring bearer, Chloe was my bridesmaid, and Rosemary was Steve's best friend. The judge from Steve's divorce attended and joked about never wanting to see us in court again, smiling widely. I bought the family estate from my brother when he retired, and Steve's entire family, including Linda, moved in after the wedding. I allowed Linda to stay because I didn't want Hope and Luke to feel deprived of their mother. Linda continued working as a maid, nanny, and mother, but with a significant pay raise. She still wore the colorful clothes Steve insisted on. Audrey's perspective. I also changed my wardrobe to bright colors, which made me feel more carefree. Linda's longing looks at Steve were heartbreaking, but he refused to believe she loved him. At 4 months pregnant, I struggled to take care of Steve. Even before showing, I was already falling behind. The tension returned to Steve's eyes, and he wasn't in the best shape. It seemed like it wouldn't take long to upset him. I had a radical idea. I needed a striker, and I had an obvious substitute in the dugout. Steve's love for me was unwavering. I talked to Linda and came up with the idea of Steve filling in for me while I was busy with pregnancy and childbirth. To say Linda was enthusiastic would be an understatement. I warned her that I had to talk to Steve about it first. Steve felt terrible and heartbroken that he couldn't control his desires. He felt like a failure as a husband. The man was crying, and I'd never seen him cry before. I cried with him. I feel like such a failure for not being able to take care of my man, I confessed. Steve made me promise that I would still love him if he took advantage of Sheila. He also made me promise that I would have complete control over his inner beast. In the 7th month of my pregnancy, Rosemary came to us in tears. Over the past year, she had become a close friend and a valued part of our lives. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing. Who could have hurt this tough, capable cop? She didn't want to talk to Steve, but after some coaxing, she decided to trust me. It turned out that her loving boyfriend wasn't what he seemed. To her horror, she had agreed to some of his manipulative wishes before regaining her pride. In retaliation, he exposed her behavior to her superiors, tarnishing her professional reputation. I knew what to do. I called Heather, gave her Rosemary's ex-boyfriend's name, and explained the situation. I told her what needed to be done. As for Rosemary, I had been thinking for a while that our corporation could benefit from a corporate security department. I decided to hire her as its leader and let her create it from the ground up. 2 problems solved in one go. Heather sued that despicable joker for everything he owned or would ever own for the next 20 years. Within 6 weeks, he was out of work. Rosemary was excelling in her new job, but emotionally, she was struggling at home. I persuaded her to move in with us. She had such a melancholic look whenever she saw Steve. Finally, I asked her why she had left him. She hesitated before saying, I didn't feel worthy of him. What nonsense. 8 months into my pregnancy, and Steve hadn't experienced any real love in 3 months. Sure, he had a physical relationship with Sheila, but it wasn't love, and I knew he needed love. I discussed this with Rosemary. She was skeptical, worried that it might damage my marriage. I've known Steve for almost 8 years, I told her. I trust him completely. If I feel things are getting out of control, I'll tell him to stop, and he will. It's as simple as that. Then I talked to Steve, and he was even more concerned than Rosemary. It doesn't feel right, Audrey, he said. It's not about right or wrong, I replied. It's about helping you and helping her. I'm not worried about us, you're exactly the man I need. This won't change that. It took a lot of persuasion, but in the end, I convinced him. Can you imagine a wife having to persuade her husband to sleep with someone else? Steve also worried that I might want to sleep with someone else someday. That will never happen, I assured him. Rosemary joined Steve's harem, as she jokingly called it. The change in her was remarkable. I encouraged her to change her wardrobe, and she started wearing bright colors and even dresses around the house. It made Steve happy. And when Steve was happy, he made me and everyone else happy. A year later, Steve was furious. His life was completely out of control, and while he loved it, he felt so guilty about it. Between me and the beast, he felt like he had little say over his personal life. The beast loved me, but Steve needed someone to talk to, someone to help him take back control. Instead of reaching out, Steve decided to write everything down. The beast had a weakness: when Steve was with his kids, the beast left him alone. That's when Steve planned to take advantage of it. Another day, another challenge, I thought with annoyance. I must be the unluckiest psychiatrist in the country. The man who called earlier sounded unusual, but something about his voice intrigued me. When Steve walked into my office with his daughter in his arms, I understood why. He introduced himself, Dr. Huff, I'm Steve Blaine, and this is my daughter, Victoria. He was a man clearly weighed down by his struggles, but the way he looked at his child, with such tenderness and love, was striking. Please, call me Steve, he said, setting Victoria on his lap. I have an unusual problem. I don't know if I have a split personality or not, but I've been writing a diary, or maybe it's a story of my life. I think it'll take you some time to read, and I'll gladly pay for that time. But please, read it, and we can meet again next week. He looked at me with such despair that I would have agreed to anything. Of course, Steve. Same time next week. He nodded and left. Over the next week, I read his story. In fact, I read Steve's diary at least 5 times and pored over the photographs he had included. One stood out, a family Christmas card. It was the kind of photo I would never have imagined myself taking, but it intrigued me. The picture showed Steve seated on a sofa with 3 women, 2 children, and an infant, probably Victoria. To his left sat an older, plain-looking woman holding the baby. To his right was a woman, clearly pregnant, who wasn't conventionally attractive. On the floor near his feet sat another woman in a pink maid's uniform. She was also pregnant, with 2 children sitting beside her. For several nights, I pinned that photo to the mirror in my bedroom. I'd look at her face, then at my own, and back again. Hell, I'm no uglier than the woman to Steve's right. How did she get so lucky? The following week, Steve returned with Victoria. He looked more at ease but still guarded. Steve, I began carefully, let's talk about the beast. He nodded, holding Victoria as she played with his tie. You've described the beast as though it's a separate entity, but I don't think it's an enemy. From what you've shared, it seems to be a protector, one that came into existence during your time in foster care. It's a harsh guardian, but it hasn't actively harmed you. Steve considered this for a moment. I think you're right. He's my protector. Cruel, sure, but I kind of like him. Then stop demonizing him, I suggested. Give him a name. Respect him. Steve smiled, one of those smiles that made me feel uncomfortably warm. What name would you suggest? What about Bob? I said, smiling back. It's friendly. Who's afraid of a monster named Bob? He closed his eyes for a moment, as though consulting with an unseen companion. "I think Bob likes his new name," he chuckled. "What a wonderful laugh," I thought. "And I'm pretty sure Bob likes you too, Dr. Huff," Steve added, his tone light but sincere. I felt my cheeks redden. Most patients avoided eye contact with me, they found me too unattractive to look at directly. But Steve, he never hesitated. He always met my gaze with warmth, never a hint of judgment. As our sessions continued, Steve mentioned his new role at Hammer Inc. "Yes," he explained, "Audrey said my skills as a troubleshooter would be wasted as vice president. I think she hated all those late nights." He laughed. "So now I'm a board member and a special assistant to both Audrey and Mary, the president. My workweek is only 30 hours or less, which gives me more time with my family." "That sounds like a great balance," I replied. The next week, Steve arrived looking desperate. "Margaret," he began, "Audrey wants to bring another woman into our house. She's pregnant again, and Rosemary and Sheila are both due in a couple of months. She's worried I won't be taken care of. This nonsense has to stop. That's not how things work in polite society." I nodded sympathetically. "Steve, I understand your frustration. Would you allow me to talk to Audrey? She loves you, and I'm sure we can find a solution that eases your mind." He looked alarmed. "Audrey is the best thing that's ever happened to me. You can talk to her, but please, don't ruin everything for me." "I'll do my best, Steve," I assured him. When I arrived at Steve's house, I knew he was out of town. Audrey greeted me warmly and ushered me into the living room. We spoke for several hours, discussing Steve's concerns. Audrey listened thoughtfully, then said, "Margaret, I know we're breaking a lot of societal norms. But I love my life, and if society doesn't like it, they can shut up." "Audrey," I replied gently, "Steve is a kind and honorable man. He thinks he's taking advantage of you all. He feels like he's betraying his marriage vows." Audrey smiled knowingly. "We'll need to work on convincing him that we're all genuinely happy with the situation. I think it would help if Steve had frequent therapy sessions with someone he trusts," I suggested. Audrey's smirk widened. "What exactly are you trying to say, Margaret? I can call you Margaret, can't I?" I hesitated, then spoke softly. "Steve told me you were looking for a new woman. I'd like to apply for the position." Audrey's grin turned into a laugh, and her eyes sparkled with delight. The next Christmas photo of the Blaine family was a sight to behold. Steve stood in the center, surrounded by 4 women, all beaming. 3 held children, and the 4th, clearly pregnant, wore the biggest smile of them all. "Audrey, honey?" Steve asked one evening. "Yes, Steve. Judge Grant from our wedding has been appearing often lately. Are we in some kind of trouble?" Audrey laughed. "Oh, Steve, not at all. But you see, we're all pregnant again, and we need to make sure you and Bob are properly cared for. So I talked to Bethany Grant. She's been interested in you for a long time." Steve groaned. "Audrey.